Welcome, everyone. Today, you are about to hear the real and deeply powerful life story of a young girl who lived inside a golden cage. She was a woman who became queen at just 18 years old, ruled the biggest empire in the entire world, fell into a deep and passionate love, lost absolutely everything, and still found the strength to carry on. This story is perfect for English learners. It is spoken slowly and clearly, and it is filled with history, romance, deep pain, and incredible power. So take a deep breath, relax, and let us travel back in time. Chapter 1. The Lonely Girl in the Golden Cage. On a cool spring day, May 24th, 1819, a baby girl was born inside the massive stone walls of Kensington Palace in London. Her given name was Alexandrina Victoria, though the entire world would later know her simply as Queen Victoria. When she was born, she was not expected to become the queen. At her birth, she was fifth in line to the throne. There were many older, more powerful men ahead of her. Because of this, no one imagined that this small, quiet child would grow up to rule an empire that covered 1/4 of the entire world. But fate had a very different plan. Over time, one by one, the men ahead of her either died or had no children of their own. The crown was slowly moving toward the little girl, to the outside world. Life inside a royal palace looked rich, beautiful, and perfect. People imagined grand parties, beautiful dresses, and endless happiness. But for young Victoria, childhood inside Kensington Palace felt much more like a cold, lonely prison than a real home. Her mother, Princess Victoria, was an extremely strict and fearful woman. Even worse, her mother's main advisor, a cruel man named Sir John Conroy, wanted to control every single part of young Victoria's life. Together, they created a set of harsh, terrible rules called the Kensington System. This system was specifically designed to isolate Victoria and keep her weak. They wanted to keep her small, dependent, and very easy to control. Because of these rules, Victoria was not allowed to walk down the stairs alone. Someone always had to hold her hand. She was not allowed to choose what she wanted to eat. She was completely forbidden from playing freely with other children. She even had to sleep in the exact same room as her mother every single night until her teenage years. She had no real childhood friends. Her only true companions were her quiet dolls and her loyal dogs. She was always watched. She was always judged. But inside this quiet, tightly controlled world, something very powerful was growing. Victoria's spirit was not broken by the strict rules. In fact, the silence made her stronger. She became an avid reader, spending hours with books. She became a lover of art and classical music. She became a very quiet, sharp observer of the world around her. And she started keeping a secret diary where she could finally speak her true mind. When Victoria was just 8 years old, her life changed in one silent, profound moment. A teacher showed her a royal family tree. The young girl followed the lines with her small finger, looked at the names, and suddenly realized something shocking. She saw that she was next. She would one day be the Queen of England. She didn't shout. She didn't tell anyone what she had discovered. But that night, alone in her room, she wrote a simple, powerful promise in her secret diary. I will be good. It was not a childish thought. It was a serious, heavy promise. She decided that when her time came, she would rule with kindness, strict discipline, and deep dignity. Her days in the palace were still very hard and cold, but she continued to learn. She became fluent in French, German, and Italian. She practiced her drawing and painting. She may have been a child locked inside a cage, but in the quiet shadows, a true queen was already forming. For 18 long years, Victoria lived perfectly inside her golden cage. She followed the strict rules. She learned her languages. She waited in the quiet shadows. But then, on a very quiet, warm morning in June 1837, her life changed in one single sudden moment. The bird was finally about to escape its cage. It was very early in the morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise over London. Victoria was fast asleep in her small bed, which was still in her mother's room. Suddenly, there was a loud, sharp knock on the heavy wooden doors of the palace. A man entered the room, walked slowly to her, and bowed very deeply. He did not call her princess anymore. He looked at the young girl and spoke the heavy words that would completely change human history. "Your Majesty, the king is dead." Her uncle, King William IV, had passed away during the night, and now, at only 18 years old, Victoria was the Queen of the British Empire. Later that very same day, she had to meet with the Royal Council. This was a large room filled with very powerful, wealthy, and experienced older men. These men all wore dark suits. They had run the country for decades. When they looked at Victoria, they did not see a strong leader. They only saw a small, weak, inexperienced teenage girl. They secretly smiled to themselves, fully expecting that they would be able to easily control her, just like her mother had done. But Victoria completely surprised them all. She did not walk into the grand room looking scared. She did not look at the floor. Victoria stood very tall. She walked directly to the center of the room, looked each of those powerful older men directly in the eye, and spoke with perfect, calm confidence. Her voice did not shake. She read her first official speech with deep strength and dignity. The older men were entirely shocked. This was not a weak child. This was a true monarch. From that exact day, Victoria took complete and total control of her own life. After 18 years of being constantly watched, she made her very first royal command. She looked at her mother and simply said, "I would like to be left alone for 1 hour." For the first time in her entire life, she was finally alone in a room. Then she used her new power to clean her life of the toxic people who had tried to crush her spirit. Her first major royal act was to permanently remove the cruel advisor, Sir John Conroy, from her life forever. She fired him, and she closed the door on her painful past. She packed her bags, left the dark, strict halls of Kensington Palace, and moved straight into the massive, beautiful Buckingham Palace. It would be her new royal home. The small girl who was once locked in her mother's shadow was completely gone. After years of being watched and ruled by others, Victoria was finally free. But as she quickly learned, true freedom came with a very heavy weight. Victoria had absolutely no experience in government. She had no husband to support her, no father to guide her, and no close siblings to talk to. She was completely surrounded by fake smiles and politicians with sharp, hidden intentions. She had to learn how to lead very fast, but she was deeply determined. She promised herself that she would never be remembered as a puppet or a weak girl on the throne. She had a very clear vision for her future. She wanted to be a queen of the people, strong, wise, and fair. But deep down, in the quietest part of her heart, she also wanted to find real love. She wanted to find a human connection in a very cold, lonely, royal world. Becoming the Queen of the British Empire was not a continuous, happy celebration. It was a massive, heavy responsibility. Victoria was only 18 years old, and the royal crown sat very heavy on her young head. But what made it even heavier was the deep isolation she still carried inside her heart. Every single morning, she had to wake up and make decisions for millions of people. Every official document, every law, every meeting with foreign leaders, it was all hers to handle alone. She had no father to ask for advice, no siblings to share her worries, and no close friends she could truly, deeply trust. Even though she had escaped her mother's dark shadow, she was still a young woman entirely alone, running a massive empire where one wrong move could shake the entire world. She desperately needed a true partner. She needed someone to stand not just beside her throne, but beside her heart. Then, one quiet morning, a letter arrived at the palace. It was from her uncle, the King of Belgium. He reminded Victoria of a young man she had briefly met when she was 16, her cousin from Germany, Prince Albert. Victoria's heart skipped a beat when she read his name. She remembered Albert very clearly. He had soft, kind eyes, a quiet voice, and a deeply thoughtful spirit. Her uncle suggested that it was time for Albert to visit London again. On October 10, 1839, Prince Albert arrived at Buckingham Palace. The very moment he entered the grand room, something magical happened. Victoria looked at him, and she simply could not stop smiling. She later wrote in her secret diary, "It was with some emotion that I beheld Albert. It was love at first sight. He was intelligent, he played beautiful music, and most importantly, he made Victoria feel completely seen as a normal human being, not just as a powerful queen. In the royal traditions of the time, a man normally asked a woman to marry him. But Victoria was the queen. No one was allowed to propose to the queen. If she wanted him, she had to ask him herself. So, for the first time in British history, a queen proposed to a man. She did it boldly, honestly, and straight from her deeply beating heart. Albert smiled and said yes. He loved her too. On February 10, 1840, Queen Victoria wore a beautiful, pure white silk gown. Before this day, royal brides wore heavy, colorful dresses made of silver and gold. But Victoria's beautiful white gown was so iconic that it started a global tradition. Because of her, brides all over the world still wear white wedding dresses today, symbolizing purity, true love, and a fresh new life. As she walked down the aisle, her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from pure joy. When they held hands and said their vows, the entire empire could feel it. This was not a cold political marriage meant to build power. This was real, burning, emotional love. Albert had no official royal power in England. He was not a king. But very quickly, he became Victoria's most trusted advisor and her truest soulmate. Marriage was not just romantic for them. It was a perfect partnership. He read heavy political documents with her, helped her understand complex laws, and whispered calm, steady thoughts when the intense pressure of ruling nearly broke her mind. He never tried to steal her power or outshine her. He stood firmly beside her, never in front of her. Victoria once wrote, "Albert is my everything, my husband, my support, my soulmate, my crown." Together, they brought absolute light and life to the royal family. Over the next 17 years, Victoria and Albert had 9 children. Their private home, Osborne House, was constantly filled with the happy noise of laughing children, wooden toys, and storybooks. It was the exact opposite of the cold, strict, silent cage of Victoria's own childhood. Albert was the calm, organized mind who loved science and education. Victoria was the passionate, emotional heart who loved art and affection. Together, they were completely unstoppable. For the first time in her life, the lonely girl was finally happy. But no human love story is completely perfect forever. A dark, terrible winter was slowly approaching the palace, but no human love story is completely perfect forever. A dark, terrible winter was slowly approaching the palace, and the brightest light in Victoria's life was about to burn out. Prince Albert was a man who cared deeply about the world. He wanted to fix the problems of the empire, improve education, and help the poor. Because he cared so much, he worked constantly. He stayed awake late into the night reading heavy political papers, organizing great global exhibitions, and writing thousands of letters. He worked so hard that his physical body became very weak. In the cold winter of 1861, Prince Albert caught a severe illness. Doctors at the time believed it was typhoid fever, a dangerous sickness caused by dirty water. He had a high fever, his body shook with chills, and his skin turned a pale, sickly color. Victoria was absolutely terrified. She stayed right by his bed every single minute. She held his cold hand tightly, she prayed to God, and she cried in secret. She completely refused to believe that he could die. How could he? He was her entire world. But on December 14, 1861, the terrible nightmare became real. Prince Albert was only 42 years old. He opened his tired eyes one last time, looked at Victoria, and whispered his final words. "It is too dark to see." And then, he was gone. The love of her life, her teacher, her best friend, her calm anchor was dead. When Albert's heart stopped, a large part of Victoria's heart stopped too. She did not scream loudly. She did not physically collapse on the floor. Instead, she just completely disappeared inside herself. The grand, happy palace instantly turned silent. The empire held its breath. Victoria stripped all the bright, beautiful colors from her entire life. From that terrible moment on, she made a promise to his memory. She would never wear color again. Every day, every season, every year, she wore only heavy black clothes. She removed all the bright flowers and happy music from her home. Even her window curtains were black. Her jewelry was black. Her thoughts were entirely black. She stopped attending royal parties, and she completely stopped smiling. She became like a ghost wearing a crown. Victoria built a private temple of deep sorrow inside her own mind, and she locked herself inside. She moved far away from the busy streets of London, hiding in quiet, isolated castles like Balmoral in the Scottish Highlands. She did not want to be seen by the public. She did not even want to rule her empire anymore. She only wanted to be left completely alone with her heavy grief. In her deep, blinding sadness, she even blamed her eldest son, Bertie, for his father's death. Just weeks before Albert died, Bertie had caused a family scandal, and Albert had traveled in the cold rain to speak with him. Victoria believed this stressful trip weakened Albert's body and killed him. Because of this, she could not fully forgive her own son, creating a painful, icy distance between them that lasted for decades. For more than 10 years, the Queen of the British Empire was entirely invisible. The little girl who had finally escaped her cage had simply built a new, darker cage for herself. For more than 10 long years, Queen Victoria almost entirely disappeared from public life. She stopped opening the government parliament sessions, something every British monarch is supposed to do. She completely avoided major public events. The newspapers began to ask loudly, "Where is our queen?" For the first time in her long reign, the British people were actually angry with her. They started calling her the Widow of Windsor and the Invisible Queen. Politicians demanded that she return to London and do her royal duty, but they did not understand her deep emotional pain. She was not just mourning a dead husband, she was mourning half of her own soul. Without Albert's confident voice and steady hands, she simply did not know who she was anymore. But Victoria was born to be a queen, and she could not hide in the dark shadows forever. A new chapter of her life was about to begin, and it started with a very clever man. A new prime minister named Benjamin Disraeli came to power. He was a charming, intelligent, and highly respectful leader. Unlike the other politicians who only complained about the Queen's absence, Disraeli made Victoria feel important and respected again. He did not treat her like a broken, useless widow. He treated her like the powerful ruler of the greatest empire on earth. He gently reminded her that her people still desperately needed her strength. Slowly, Victoria stepped back out into the light. She returned to London. She began to meet with world leaders again and attended public events. Her deep sadness was still there. She still wore her black clothes. But her grief had transformed into a quiet, iron strength. She was no longer a young, inexperienced queen in love. She was a mature, unstoppable force. Under her rule, the British Empire grew massively. By the 1870s, it stretched across Canada, Australia, South Africa, and massive parts of Asia. People proudly said, "The sun never sets on the British Empire," because it was so large that there was always daylight in some part of her lands. In 1876, Prime Minister Disraeli helped give Victoria a brand new, powerful title, Empress of India. India was considered the most beautiful and valuable jewel of the British Empire. Victoria deeply loved this new title. Even though she had never traveled to India, she felt a strong spiritual connection to the country. She filled her royal palaces with beautiful Indian art, rich fabrics, and new languages. During this time, a young Indian man named Abdul Karim came to England to serve the Queen. He was originally sent to be a simple waiter, but he quickly became one of Victoria's closest and most loyal companions. She respectfully called him Munshi, which means teacher. Abdul taught the Queen about Indian food, culture, and spirituality. He even helped her learn to read and write in the Urdu language. The royal family and the wealthy politicians secretly hated Abdul. They were extremely jealous and prejudiced that a poor foreign man had so much influence over the empress. But Victoria did not care at all about their angry whispers. She aggressively protected Abdul, giving him land and high titles. Through him, the Queen finally connected with a massive part of her empire that she could never see with her own eyes. Victoria was not just ruling over lands, she was ruling over history. She arranged powerful marriages for her 9 children and her many grandchildren. connecting her family to almost every single royal house in Europe, from Germany to Russia to Spain. Because of this massive family tree, she became known across the world as the grandmother of Europe. The little girl who once lived in a cage of fear was now the mother of an entire global empire. By the late 1800s, Queen Victoria was no longer just a monarch. She was a living, breathing legend. An entire era was about to end, but an unforgettable legend was already born. During her long reign of over 60 years, the world around her had completely transformed. When she first became queen, people read by candlelight and traveled slowly by horse. But now, gas lamps were replaced by bright electricity. Slow wooden ships were replaced by massive steamships, and fast trains connected distant cities. The world could communicate instantly using the new telegraph. This entire time in human history was named directly after her, the Victorian era. She was the strict, steady face of a rapidly changing world. But as Victoria entered her 80s, the powerful empress finally began to slow down. She became much quieter and more reflective. Her legs hurt constantly, and her eyesight was fading into the dark. Yet she never gave up her royal duties. She still sat at her desk, writing daily letters to her massive family across Europe. And every single night, she still wrote in her diary, speaking softly to the spirit of her beloved Albert. She often whispered that she was very tired of life, but she never once said that she regretted it. In January 1901, the Queen's health declined very fast. She was staying at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. This was the exact same peaceful, beautiful home where she had once been so incredibly happy with Albert and their young children. She stopped eating properly and slept for most of the day. The doctors looked at her and knew the heavy truth. The final chapter was here. Her large royal family quickly gathered around her bed. Some of them she loved deeply, and some she had fought with for years. But in those final, quiet days, none of the arguments mattered. She was no longer the ruler of the world. She was simply an old, tired woman preparing to leave it. On January 22, 1901, Queen Victoria took her very last breath. She was 81 years old. The woman who had survived intense love, crushing loss, deep loneliness, and the heavy weight of absolute power was finally at rest. Her death was entirely peaceful. When the news left the palace, the entire world stopped. The news spread instantly from London to India, from Canada to Australia, and from Africa to the Caribbean. Millions of people cried in the streets. Shops closed their doors. Heavy church bells rang loudly through the air, and flags were lowered in deep respect. Millions of people had never known any other monarch in their entire lives. To them, Queen Victoria was a constant, steady mountain. Now she was gone. But Victoria had left very clear, beautiful instructions for her final goodbye. After wearing heavy black clothes for 40 long years, she ordered that her funeral must not be dark. She demanded a pure white funeral. Why? Because she believed she was finally going to be reunited with her true love, Albert. She also ordered that her coffin be filled with her deepest, most private memories. It was not a cold royal box, it was a woman's memory box. She asked her servants to place Albert's robe right beside her body. She held a soft lock of his hair in her hand, and a picture of him was placed right next to her heart. She even secretly included a photograph of her loyal Scottish servant, John Brown, hidden carefully inside. As her white coffin was carried slowly and carefully through the streets of London, kings, queens, and powerful soldiers from across the entire world bowed their heads. The massive empire she ruled stood completely still. The Victorian era was officially over. The world would eventually move forward, but nothing would ever feel exactly the same again. Because Queen Victoria had not just ruled Britain, she had completely defined it. Queen Victoria's life is now a part of history. But her story is much more than just old dates and dusty crowns. It is a deep, emotional journey of a woman who completely refused to remain small. What can a modern person living today learn from a 19th century queen? Here are 5 deep and powerful life lessons from Queen Victoria's biography. 1. Where you start does not decide where you end. Victoria was never meant to be the queen. She was just a small, quiet girl born into a very strict, cold household. She was heavily controlled, completely isolated, and surrounded by harsh rules. She was not even allowed to walk down the stairs alone. People actively tried to keep her weak and silent. But destiny had completely different plans. At just 18 years old, she stepped into absolute power, and the whole world watched her rise. The lesson: your beginning is not your ending, even if the world says you are not enough. Or if you feel completely trapped, you can still become something great. 2. Pain will come, but you must still carry on. Victoria experienced the deepest, most crushing pain a human heart can feel. She lost her one true love, Prince Albert. When he died, her entire world collapsed. She fell into a deep, blinding sadness for many years. She wore heavy black clothes for the rest of her life and disappeared from the public eye. People truly thought she would never come back, but she did. She came back much stronger. Not because her pain magically went away, but because she learned to carry her heavy grief and still do her duty. The lesson: life will break your heart. You will face terrible heartbreak. But do not stop living. You can be deeply sad and still be incredibly strong. 3. Love is not a weakness. It is your power. Queen Victoria did not rule her massive empire alone. She had Prince Albert, her true partner in both life and leadership. He helped her become a much better, calmer person. He guided her, supported her, and stood right beside her, never in front of her and never behind her. She loved him deeply, and her heart ruled just as much as her heavy crown did. The lesson: real love does not make you weak, it makes you powerful. Surround yourself with people who bring out the absolute best in you and who proudly walk beside you. 4. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. Victoria was not a loud, angry woman. She did not give long, screaming speeches. She did not stand on grand stages using big, complicated words to frighten people. Instead, she ruled with quiet grace, steady letters, silence, and perfect consistency. She built global trust by being calm and always present, even through her heavy grief and old age. People did not follow her because she shouted at them. They followed her because she stood incredibly firm. The lesson: you do not need to scream to be heard. You do not need to shine the brightest to be seen. Sometimes, quiet, steady strength changes the world much more than loud noise ever can. 5. Your life can inspire generations without you even knowing. Victoria did not chase empty fame. She did not try to impress people or act like a modern celebrity. She only focused on being strong, surviving her own heartbreak, ruling with careful duty, and leaving something solid behind. Today, more than 100 years later, we still say her name. We still tell her emotional story. She became the defining symbol of an entire century. The lesson: you may not know it yet, but your personal story deeply matters. Live your life with strength, love deeply, and you will be remembered. Now, let us look back at the amazing story of Queen Victoria. Take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and listen to her journey one more time. We will review the story simply and slowly. This will help you remember the new English words and the powerful history. In the year 1819, a baby girl named Victoria was born in London. She lived in a beautiful palace, but her life was not happy. Her mother was very strict. Victoria was closely watched and controlled every single day. She had no friends and felt very lonely, but she secretly promised herself that she would be a good and strong person. When Victoria was only 18 years old, her uncle, the king, died. Suddenly, the lonely girl became the queen of the British Empire. She was finally free from her mother's strict rules. She fired the cruel men who tried to control her. She moved into Buckingham Palace and began to lead her country. Soon after, she met her cousin, Prince Albert from Germany. It was true love at first sight. Because she was the queen, she asked him to marry her. She wore a beautiful white dress, starting a tradition that continues today. Albert became her best friend and her most trusted advisor. They worked together, they laughed together, and they had 9 children. For the first time, Victoria was truly happy. But then, a terrible tragedy happened. Prince Albert worked too hard and became very sick. In 1861, when he was only 42 years old, he died. Victoria's heart was completely broken. She stopped wearing bright colors and wore only heavy black clothes for the rest of her life. She hid in quiet castles and stopped doing her royal duties. The people called her the Invisible Queen. After many years of deep sadness, a clever prime minister named Benjamin Disraeli helped her return to the world. She stepped back into the light and began to rule again. She became the Empress of India and made friends with an Indian teacher named Abdul Karim. She ruled a massive global empire and arranged marriages for her children all across Europe. Finally, in 1901, at the age of 81, Queen Victoria passed away peacefully. Her funeral was entirely white so she could reunite with her beloved Albert. She ruled for over 60 years, and her quiet strength completely changed the world. Now, imagine that you are walking quietly into the royal palace. You find an old, leather book resting on a wooden desk. It is Queen Victoria's secret diary. Let us open the pages and listen to her tell her own story from her own heart. Dear Diary, my name is Alexandrina Victoria, but the world knows me simply as Queen Victoria. When you look at my statues today, you see a powerful, serious woman in heavy black clothes. But I was not always a powerful empress. Once I was just a very lonely little girl. I lived inside a beautiful golden cage called Kensington Palace. I was never supposed to be the queen. My mother and her cruel advisor watched my every single move. I could not walk down the stairs alone. I had no friends to play with. They wanted me to be weak. They wanted to control me. But in the deep silence of my bedroom, I wrote in my secret diary. I realized the crown was coming to me, and I promised myself, I will be good. I will be strong. When I was 18 years old, a man knocked on my door and told me the king was dead. Suddenly, my cage was open. I was free. I sent the cruel men away forever. I put the heavy crown on my own head. But ruling an empire is very cold and deeply lonely. Then, my beautiful Albert arrived. The moment I looked into his kind eyes, my heart finally woke up. Because I was the queen, I had to ask him to marry me. I wore a pure white dress. He became my husband, my best friend, and my true soulmate. We had 9 beautiful children. We had a home filled with loud, happy laughter. For the first time in my entire life, I was truly, completely happy. But life can be very cruel. My beautiful Albert worked too hard for our people. When he was only 42 years old, he got sick. He closed his eyes, told me it was too dark to see, and he left me alone in the dark. For many, many years, I thought my life ended with his. I stripped all the color from my world. I wore only heavy black clothes. I locked myself away in quiet, empty castles. I was a ghost wearing a crown. I ignored my empire because my heart was completely shattered. But my people still needed me. Slowly, I realized a powerful truth. I learned that I could carry my broken heart and still be a strong leader. I stepped back out into the light. I became the Empress of India. I learned new languages and made new friends, like my loyal teacher, Abdul. I ruled this world for over 60 years. I survived crushing pain, and I discovered true, quiet power. I learned that you can completely lose your heart, but you can still lead the world. And so, the incredible true story of Queen Victoria comes to a peaceful end. Her life was so much more than just old history in a dusty book. It was a deeply emotional, beautiful journey of a woman who completely refused to remain small. She was born into a cage of fear. She was raised in strict silence. She was given a heavy crown much too early. She loved deeply once, and she lost that love forever. She cried. She disappeared. But most importantly, she came back. She ruled the world not because she was a perfect human being, but because she was incredibly real. She made painful mistakes. She felt deeply lonely. She struggled to find her way in the dark. But still, she led millions of people. She inspired entire generations. She became a strict mother, a grieving widow, a brave survivor, and a legendary leader, all in one single life. Her quiet voice still echoes today, not in the words she spoke, but in the powerful example she set for all of us. So, if you ever feel too broken, too alone, or too ordinary to do something great in your own life, remember the story of Queen Victoria. She proved that you can start with absolutely nothing and build an empire. You can lose your heart and still lead with your soul. You can feel completely forgotten in the dark and still make history in the light. You can be small and still be remembered forever. Her story is over, but my friend, your story is just beginning. If this powerful journey moved you today, if it helped your English, or if it opened your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are building a beautiful community of learners, and this is just one of many true stories that will help you learn English in a deep, meaningful way. I would absolutely love to hear from you in the comments below. Which of the 5 life lessons from Queen Victoria was your favorite? You can also listen to this story again tonight before you go to sleep. It will help you practice your English listening skills, understand real history, and feel motivated for tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for learning with us today. Have a wonderful, peaceful day, and always remember, even a lonely girl can become a queen, and even you can become completely unforgettable.